So rather than engaging with the intellect and with the passions, he's viewing the other than human world purely as this machine to be worked with to get things for human contact. So each of these are wrong, each of these core assumptions. So knowledge is not fixed, but rather it emerges from the process of people working together and working with their hands. Sorry, we'll go back to this one. So the first assumption, that there is not a fixed body of knowledge. It's true that in some areas there is. So for example, if you're studying brain surgery, or you're studying how to build an aeroplane, there is a formula. You know, I do not want to fly in an aeroplane designed by philosophers. Poets. Or when I go to the dentist,
it might be very interesting for me.
Or when I go to the dentist, I want someone who has studied linear. But really, as soon as human agency is involved, as soon as human beings are involved, there isn't a fixed body of knowledge. We create knowledge in the process of collaborating and working together and trying to make sense of our world. There are many ways of learning. I love this quote. I'm just going to, I hope you can help me translate this well. All cognition is based on knowledge that comes initially from the body. The body is the initial place where we learn. Other domains are mapped onto our embodied knowledge using primarily conceptual metaphors. This is a really, now this is only one opinion, but I find this persuasive that actually all learning comes initially through the body and is then transferred to the intellect through the use of metaphors. I find this a very beautiful idea. So it's not just through the intellect that we learn. I'm a big fan of using theatre in the classroom, of using embodied work, as we did this morning. This is a photograph from my classroom last week, where we were studying systems in an embodied theatrical way. And again, a lovely little quote here. Acknowledging our love for the living world does something that a library full of papers on sustainable development and ecosystem services cannot. It engages the imagination as well as the intellect.
Can you wait 1 second?
So in other words, we're saying to the students...
Can you wait 1 second? I'm trying to still translate
of course.
the...
Sorry.
That's something that I like. 私たちのその生きている世界に対しての愛をなんていうかそれに気づくことによって図書館にあるどれだけその持続可能なサステナビリティとかエコシステムのサービスがどうのこうのっていうそういう本とかよりもやっぱり私たちの想像力を想像力で自分の持っている情報を活用できるようにしていく。
So the distinguished biologist E.O. Wilson coined the term biophilia, meaning that simply by being children of the earth, we naturally love the earth. And so we love all, like, so when we see animals on wherever, in television, zoo, or in the wild, our heart opens naturally because this is us, this is who we are. And so the idea that somehow this is not acceptable in the classroom is simply suicidal. So we need to consciously bring this back in and say not only is it acceptable to bring the emotions in, but it is essential to bring the emotions in. And of course this again is from the college where I work, Schumacher College in Devon. Students are in my economics classroom there is a big pile of papers and pens and collage, so the students are encouraged while they're studying economics to be engaged in artwork at the same time. And we frequently stop the lesson and then invite the students to design, to write poetry or to do artwork connected to what they've just learned as a way of further deepening their understanding. And of course, the intellect is important as well. It's not as if the intellect is unimportant. However, and I think this echoes something that Lucas said, is that the volume is so high of the intellect that we've lost everything else. So even though the intellect is really important, we turn down the volume of the intellect to allow the emotion, the intuition, the body to become more engaged as well. So this is the third core assumption, that learning is not an individual pursuit. It's by definition social. But we learn much better when we're doing it collaboratively with others. Again, this is a photograph from my classroom taken last week. These students are not cheating. They are having fun in working collaboratively on a real-life project. So this is the final slide, and this lovely quote from my fellow countryman, the poet W.B. Yeats. A pail is an old word for a bucket. So education is not the filling of a bucket, but the lighting of the fire. Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to give some theoretical background to further reinforce. I mean, I think we all know this intuitively, that when we can be playful and physical and artistic and intuitive, that we learn better and we remember more. This was simply providing some theoretical basis for that understanding. And more. Okay. So what I want to invite, I mean, maybe we'll have a little period if there's any questions, and then my invitation to you as lifelong learners, as people continually engaged in learning, is there anything that you can take from this morning? How could you bring that into your lives? As mothers, fathers, factory workers, office workers, teachers, students, whatever you're working on. But before we do that, are there any questions emerging from my presentation?
シアター形式で経済を教えるって言われたんですけど、なんか少しだけどういうことなのか、経済と写真がすごく多いので、ちょっと近づけてもらえると。
You showed a picture of people doing theater, and you said you're teaching economics, and it feels like they're just in the complete opposite sphere. So I'm curious about how exactly do you merge that? Like, can you give a concrete example so I can understand that better?
Good, really good question. Thank you. Let me give two examples. One is there is a way of working that's been developed in Brazil called theater of the oppressed. And the way this works is that a community, a group, they can be actors or students, or they come into a community, and the community then describes some oppression that is happening in the village. It can be the interest rates of the money lenders are charging. It's often related to gender or some gender conflict. And then the actors play the drama.
、その演出するんですね、みんなの前にこういうことですから。
And the villagers are invited to stop the action at any point and then come in and play roles within the drama.
そして村人がそのシアター、その演出をしている間にどのタイミングでも一時停止ボタンを押せる状態になって、そしてそのシアターの中に入って自分もその一人のアクター、その関わっている人として参加できるようになって、その状況を変えるそのアクターになるんですね。
And so the danger, the way we do education at the moment,
今の教育のあり方というのは、
the danger is that the student is thinking about a problem from the outside.
学生たちがその外から問題を考えようとしているという。
rather than feeling deeply immersed in the dynamic personally.
その中に入って本当にその複雑ないろんな感情も出てくるようなその内部からの視点を持ってないんですね。
So they're cleverer, they've got more information, but they're not moved emotionally to change the behavior.
なので外から見てるとなんかもちろん客観的に見るっていうそういう視点はあるんですけど、でも感情が動かない。だからその状況を変えようっていうそこの原動力がない。
I want to give one other example.
もう一つの事例は。
So I would be teaching about ecological footprints.
エコロジカルフットプリントっていう。
Is that a familiar concept? So the footprint is it's a measure of our resource consumption and how much waste we're creating. So studies in ecological footprinting tell us that if everyone on Earth had the lifestyle of the average North American, we'd need 5 planets. And for the average, I'm not sure about Japan, but for the average Western European, it's about 3.5 planets. So I noticed that when I was giving information on ecological devastation, on communities being broken up, that the students, that two things would happen.
そしてこういうことを学生たちと学んでいるときに2つのことが起きるんですね。
On the one hand, the students would respond with the intellect and not with the emotion.
頭で反応するんだけど感情ではあんまり反応
Whereas really, a healthy response would be emotional, like an emotional response to the destruction of our life. And the second thing was that within an hour, it was as if the presentation hadn't happened.
1時間後には私がやったプレゼンテーションがなかったような感じに流されてしまうんですね。
So we started playing with theatre.
そしてシアターでやり始めました。
And one of the first things we did was we simply created 4 groups on the village green.
私たちがやったのはその芝生の上で4つのグループ。
So the first one was a North American group.
そして北欧米の人のグループの人。
And they made a circle touching fingertip to fingertip.
そして指先の大きな円をそのグループで作りました。大きな輪でした。
To describe the space they were taking.
彼らが取っているスペースを表現しています。
And then there was a Western European circle.
そして西ヨーロッパの人たちは
that was big but not quite so big.
大きい輪なんだけどそこまでは少なかった。
There was then a Central American
そ
circle,
して中米のサークルが
which was significantly smaller.
とても小さい輪でした。
And then there was an African circle, which was just bodies tightly together.
アフリカの輪っていうのはもうみんなもう密着しているそういう状態です。
And immediately the difference was clear.
そしてそこでもう明確だったその違いが。
There were tears.
そして涙が出てきたり。
There was a deep, that because the body was involved in the learning process, there was a deep.
学びのプロセスの中に取り入れられていたので、すごく深い変容がその場で起こりました。
So it stopped being an intellectual problem to solve and started being a real life
ただ頭で考えるような問題ではなくて、本当にもうリアルに体感できるような場になりました。
So as a teacher of economics, I personally spend all of my
経済を教える
training budget on theatre workshops.
自分のトレーニングに使っているお金は全部そういう学びに自分がよりシアターとかを勉強する。
Thank you very much. 私がね、よくその 例えばワークショップをしようとするときに、こんなのバーチャルじゃないか、こんなバーチャルなことで何が分かるんだ、もうワークショップなんかやらなくていいよっていう人がいて。
Whenever I try to do this kind of workshop, 彼が言ったような
まあ、そうさっきのような
シアター
シアターまでいかないけど、例えばさっきのトライアングルとか。
So whenever I do workshops, and like what you did at the beginning of this workshop, the triangle, that sometimes there's somebody in the audience who makes a comment like, "What's the point of doing this? It's just it feels so virtual."
でもその時に私はこうどう言ってそれをこうですよっていうことを言えばいいのかと思っていたんですけど、今すごく伝わってます。Thank you.
And I always get stuck, and I'm not sure how to respond. But what you just shared really moved me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And we will be offering courses at Schumacher College in this pedagogy. So please go.
で、シューマッハでこういうようなその学び方の講座をやっているので、よかったらぜひ来てください。
Okay, so
we're done.
Okay, so I was hoping we would have time to do a little more work in the group. So the invitation to you as you go away is to reflect on how can you, in practical terms, take what you've got from this morning into your own lives as learners.
人生の中にどう取り入れられるかっていうのをちょっと振り返ってみて、ぜひ考えてください。
We also invite you before you leave, if you felt like filling in something in the card, we really appreciate it, because that's going to be a very useful input for the process we are going through. And thank you very much, everybody, for your disposition and your smiles and your attention.
ありがとうございます。